For Sunday, June 18th, Father's Day, you have found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, the 6th District Congressional runoff, Fulton County assessments, and VA reform. These and other topics.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us. We have today our attorney, Carrie Ichter, sitting in for the vacationing Dick Williams. It's me, Phil Kent, and of course our regulars, Alexis Scott and Jeff Dickerson. I thought we ought to maybe pause for a moment as we start the program and just talk a little bit about the terrible political assassination attempt that occurred the other day with the GOP baseball team in Virginia. And Jeff, you and I were talking a little bit before the program started that isn't it kind of sad that it takes an act of violence like this to kind of bring Americans together. I think we all like Americans being brought together, and it's a good thing. But I just like to reflect on how we've got to maybe tone down the rhetoric. Now, you know, it's interesting. On a personal note, you know, we have rhetorical combat on this program every week, and it's a good, vigorous thing. But I'd like to tell the viewers that, you know, we're friends. We've known each other for years. We often chat about family and health and what's going on. And I just wanted people to tell you that I think the Georgia Gang is actually a good example of a vigorous debate, passionate debate, but civility. But I'd throw that out to all of you.
You know, and I think that that's probably the case also among members of the House and the Senate, that there is a collegiality among them personally, even though when it comes to politics, they can disagree and disagree very vehemently on some important issues. But somewhere along the line, there seems to be somewhat of a breakdown that allows this kind of an incident to happen, and people take what should be civil conversation and the ability to agree to disagree into violence. And unfortunately, it is when we get to that extreme that we start to kind of pull back.
Well, I think that the message that we need to take away from that, in addition to that, is that we have got to find a way to keep guns out of the hands of crazy people in this country. I mean, I know that the gun advocates say that the best solution for a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, but there were 2 trained good guys with guns at that field. They both got shot, in addition to all of the other people who got shot. Now, they took down the shooter, but
I'm glad somebody with guns was there. What do you think? Too. What do you think, Alexis?
Well, yeah, I'm recalling back in the 60s, I believe it was H. Rap Brown, who later became Jamil Al-Amin, who said violence is as American as cherry pie. And unfortunately, that is part of our culture. We just have a violence culture, and we have to combat it. And Bernice King at the King Center has a program called Nonviolence 365, in which they do training for young folk and people in general to just sort of figure out a way to resolve conflicts without violence, and that's what we need to start doing.
Well, I agree. You know, we had, of course, the American Revolution, the Wild Wild West, but
the Civil War.
In the Civil War, and yeah, we could point to a lot of things, but I do think the mark of a civilization is to try to have what we have in this country, which should be a model for the world, and that is when we change governments, it's done by ballots and not bullets. And that's something that all Americans of all political stripes ought to really remember. Anyhow, I wanted to touch on that. Now we go, though, to the controversy and the issue of the hour, and that is the 6th District congressional race. All national eyes are on this.
Yes.
I'll just start off by saying, and I want to go down the table and get everybody's analysis, but I wanted to point out the early voting, and we always have talked about turnout as the key in these special elections. We all know that. But the early voting numbers are looking a lot better for the GOP. Some of you know I was very pessimistic about the Handel campaign 2 weeks ago. 19,000 early votes have been done since Friday. Excuse me, a 19,000 early vote lead for the GOP has been done since Friday. What do I mean by that? We can track who votes identifiably in GOP and Democrat primaries. And so the Democrats have to do very well in early voting, and they've lagged. So what do you think? I'll just go down the table.
Does it also include the independent vote?
This does include the independent vote. They split both ways, so it's going to be a toss-up.
Yeah, so
and that's why it's close.
Right, and I think it's still going to be close, right down to the wire. We're not going to know until what?
But my point is the
night.
Democrats in the Ossoff campaign knows this. They have to do well in the early votes, and it ended Friday.
Right. But
what do you think, Jeff?
I think that they're going to do a great job of getting people out to the polls on Tuesday. And again, as I mentioned last week, you do have that crossover, Republicans voting for Ossoff, that is significantly greater than the number of Democrats who are voting for Handel. And I think that that could actually be the difference in this race.
Carrie?
Well, the one marked thing that we've seen is that the huge disparity in age demographic, the place where most of the voting is occurring is 40 and up, and that favors Handel by all indications. I tried to talk to some millennials when I could get their nose out of their smartphones to find out what they were thinking about politics, and after they stopped scoffing at me for being completely out of touch, I've never bought a pair of jeans that had holes in them when purchased.
Right.
So, it seems as though they're just disdainful of the entire process, and it's not really because they don't care about politics or they're disinterested. They're just disgusted by the banality and the money and all the self-promotion that goes on in these kinds of races.
Who can blame them?
Well, that's interesting. And you talk about the millennials, Carrie, but if you look at the U.S. Elections Project, which incidentally for viewers is a good website and it tracked the early vote, the millennials, Jeff, they seem to be at the beach or on vacation. They're not voting, and Ossoff has got to be nervous about that.
Well, they certainly don't appear to have voted in the early voting, but they may be waiting for the Tuesday to vote. I mean, that's where the focus has been.
I'm not so sure in this race that we're going to see that level of apathy among younger people. They know what's at stake. They want to be able to send a message, I think, to this president, which of course is where this whole campaign started. And I think that a lot of people are somewhat invigorated that Ossoff is where he is in this race, that he's raised this amount of money, that he's gotten this amount of momentum going. You have to remember early on, I don't know whenever this race started, Dick Williams was sitting in that seat making fun of a Democrat running in this district. Who's this guy, John Ossoff, he said. What does he think he's going to do? Well, now we see.
And to Dick's point earlier, too, that he has run a really brilliant campaign, so much so that he has not even received an endorsement from Bernie Sanders because he's too centrist.
Well, I think that Ossoff has run.
Right.
I think Ossoff has run a very good campaign in a Republican-leaning district.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. Although I will say that Karen Handel's campaign has really stepped it up in terms of fundraising. She started with nothing after that April race where she became the lone Republican candidate. And I will say this too, I think that their turnout effort, which I was very critical of earlier, has been better. Right. What do you think, Carrie?
Absolutely. It appears that that they're doing very well at this point. And I think it's advantage Handel at this point. I've been. Well, I was going
to ask for predictions, so go ahead.
Well, I feel snake bit after the Super Bowl. I was right for 58 minutes, but I think Handel is going to win. I'm not going to predict a margin of victory, but if she wins by one vote, I'm sure that John Ossoff will wish he lived in the district.
How about that? That's funny.
What about you, Jeff? Prediction?
Yeah, I think that Ossoff is going to pull it off. It's not going to be by a large margin, that's for sure. But I think it's going to be a squeaker, and then he's going to pull this thing off. Largely organization. I think a really well professionally run campaign, and all that money.
Alexis?
Yeah, I'm sort of in the middle here. I don't know. I really don't know who's going to make, because it's been so historically a red district that it doesn't seem why it should change, except that this has been an extraordinary campaign by this young man. So we'll see.
Well, okay. The right answer is that Handel will squeak it out and win.
That's the right answer.
That's the right answer. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about more issues, including those 2 Georgia correction officers that were murdered by these animals. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams today. And I'd like to turn to one of the other big news stories of the past week, and that was the just tragic killing, the murder of these two Georgia correction agents in Putnam County. They were, of course, transporting prisoners in a Department of Corrections prison bus, and somehow these two prisoners got through the gate that separates them from the front where the driver is, and just brutally murdered these two officers. And in fact, some of my sources say some of the other prisoners in the bus who all stayed there, some of them were crying. It was such a horrendous crime. But anyhow, they were caught, and I'll just go down the table again for comments on this.
Well, predictably, they have been caught. Generally speaking, when you put tattoos all over your face like the one convict did, you don't blend in so well. So, so they've been caught. I think that the story now is, how did this happen? What was the lapse in security? And is somebody going to be held accountable for this tragic event?
Well, that's right. I'll just throw this out. There's two things that are going to be happening right now, and that is the internal investigation, of course, by the Department of Corrections as to how that door was opened. And then secondly, Sheriff Howard Sills of Putnam County will be doing, as you know, a criminal investigation. I hope that there wasn't complacency on the part of these officers or what happened, but we do need to find out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I will say this too. I tell you what, I would tell some of those bleeding heart liberal friends out there of mine that that's one reason why we do need a death penalty for a heinous crime like this. It was caught on video, from what I'm told. Anyhow, I wanted to touch on another news item, and I'm going to turn, Alexis, I guess to you first. You saw where the city of Atlanta has committed to renewable energy over the next, I think, 15 years. And it's mainly, of course, solar and wind. Well, that doesn't work too well. Isn't that, I'm just throwing this out, I have not done my research, but isn't this going to be costly, and is this the right way to go?
Well, certainly renewable energy is the right way to go. I mean, we don't want to go back to the days of coal and, you know, pollutants in the air. So I think it's an admirable goal. It remains to be seen how exactly it's going to work its way out, but I think it's a good goal for the city to have.
Jeff, what do you think?
I think that we need to make those kinds of investments, Phil. I mean, we made those investments when we started to dig in coal mines, and we made those investments when we started to build interstate gas pipelines, and you need to make the same kinds of investments in renewable energy.
Well, that's not the issue, though. I mean, I think we're all for a diversified portfolio that includes that, but to have the whole thing carry, is that feasible?
I don't. I mean, it's great for policymakers now to make these bold plans for 15 years in the future, where either people will have forgotten about it or it's somebody else's problem in implementing it. But one of the things that they don't seem to have paid a lot of attention to is the only way that renewables can replace fossil fuels is if you either tax fossil fuels very heavily or subsidize renewables very heavily. And both of those things mean much higher costs for taxpayers and for consumers of energy. And the future administrations are the ones who are going to be made responsible for that because of these bold declarations that are being made by today's politicians.
Well, I still think it's a laudable thing to do. I mean, look at what happened with when Mayor Shirley Franklin was mayor. The city had neglected the sewers and water treatments for years and decades. And so it did cost money, but it needed to be done, and it had to be done in order for us to progress forward. So it's just a commitment that needs to be made.
I think we were under a federal court order to do it, too.
Exactly. Well, that, too. I mean, that made a difference as well. And we don't want to have to be up against the wall to do these things.
Well, let's pivot to another nationally looked at high-profile case here in Atlanta, the case of prominent Atlanta attorney Tex McIver, who is now accused, rightly or wrongly, of felony murder when he shot his wife Diane last September near Piedmont Park in Atlanta. And he was denied bail this past week, which surprised a lot of people. And then the trial date was set for October 30th. Carrie, you followed this. What are your observations?
I think that this is just an outrage. The Fulton County DEA's office is engaged in what is a despicable, politically motivated trophy prosecution. This is their trophy prosecution. The Atlanta PD did an investigation, made a finding that this was an accident, and without doing any independent investigation at all, the DA's office comes out and decides to charge Mr. McIver with murder. Then after charging him with murder, they fight to keep him in jail in spite of the fact that he has no criminal history, no history of violence. Then they go to the grand jury and they make up this story about there being a second will that his wife had out there that is his motivation for killing her. There is absolutely no evidence that such a will existed, totally fabricated, and now they want to keep him in jail until such time as he goes to trial, making up stories about how he is intimidating or trying to influence witnesses. But when they had to make a showing in front of the court, none of the people that they talked about were potential witnesses on any material issue in the case. It is despicable. It is star chamber tactics, and any lawyer worth their salt should be offended by this. It is an affront to justice, and if they can do this to somebody like Mr. McIver, we are all at risk.
Alexis, we've talked about the factors of race and politics in the McIver case. What do you think?
Well, I think that the factors of race are still there. I think the initial report was that somehow he was alarmed because they were going through Piedmont Park or black neighborhood or something.
That was a PR agent that said that, yes.
And so, I mean, and that's unfortunate that that came up as a reason for him handling the gun. So, you know, I don't know what to think about it. I mean, I think it's a tragic case. It's just really sad. But, you know, had the people been black and poor, sure he would have been charged right away.
Well, okay, I think I'm getting the signal. Let's go to a next segment because I want to work in those Fulton County tax assessments, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some politics. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams. And the local controversy in Fulton County, Georgia's most populous and largest county, is property tax assessments. There has been a revolt going on over the last 2 weeks after everybody in the mail was getting all sorts of increases, some of them up to 50%, with some neighborhoods adjoining other neighborhoods just getting completely wildly different assessments. And I turn to you, Carrie. You're a Fulton County, and what's your take on this?
Well, I hope it turns out resolved. The politicians are getting out in front of this because ultimately, even if the assessors are right, they're the ones who are going to be held responsible. They're trying to get the assessments freezed at the 2016 level until such time as it can be sorted out. There was supposed to be a vote on that, I think, Thursday night, but it got tabled, as I understand it. So we're not going to know exactly what is going to happen. The chief assessor is defending the assessment numbers, but they appear in some cases, as you said, to be wildly wrong. The one thing I heard this morning is that even if the assessments are upheld and they are much higher than they were before, the county established its budget based upon the 2016 assessment and says that it really doesn't need all that additional money. So as a consequence, they can reduce the millage rate in order to offset the increased values. And I think that that's probably what's going to happen.
Jeff, we've been through these assessment battles for years. What do you think?
Well, I think that you may see a legislative solution if they don't do something about this and do it fast. I mean, I don't think that there's any question that members of the Fulton delegation are going to intervene in the middle of this. The Board of Assessors has said that it can't pull these assessments back, and that the only thing that homeowners can do is appeal on an individual basis. That seems like an awful lot of work for the county to have to go through, an awful lot of individual appeals. And so that's not going to get resolved by January. So I think that you're going to see some legislative action.
What do you think, Alexis?
Yeah, I tend to agree with what's been said already. The assessors are saying they can't take it back, and they are suggesting that people appeal, but the legislature is looking at it. I think there's a meeting scheduled for next week even to review what's going on, and we'll see what happens. And of course, people in the city and the county commission chair is running for mayor, and that's an election year, so that's making the politicians a lot more responsive than they might otherwise be. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I would urge all Fulton Countyans to appeal your assessment if you feel it's wrong. Let me talk about something, and this is a shocker. Hold on to your hats here. A bipartisan vote in the U.S. Congress that actually is going to help the American people, and specifically veterans in the Veterans Administration. And I think a lot of kudos go to our own senior U.S. Senator Johnny Isakson, who has been helping promote this bill for 2 years, and primarily, and I think all of you saw it, it'll make it easier to fire some of these incompetents, especially in Atlanta and in Augusta and elsewhere at these VA centers. Did you follow this?
I did, and Johnny Isakson is to be congratulated. He has been out in front on that issue from the get-go. You are right about one of the reforms, that it allows you to get rid of the people who are ineffective and not doing their jobs. And hopefully this will be a first step in being able to do that federal government-wide with all agencies. There's no reason why merit system protections ought to be in place to keep people who can't do their jobs and won't do their jobs in their jobs.
Agreed. Absolutely, no question about it. I think that that's exactly right. It's gone on for too long, and we need to be able to change it. If you're not doing your job, you should get fired, whatever it is, but especially a government job.
I don't disagree with that at all. However, I will say that the federal government has been one of the key sources of hiring of people of color over the last 40 years when desegregation came about. And so, you know, that it's always a sensitive issue when you're talking about firing people from the federal government because of that disproportionality there. So I would hope that that the VA would be responsive to the veterans' needs, and we need to look at that because there are hundreds of thousands of veterans now as a result of the decade and a half of war that we've been in.
Well, with respect to the race issue, though, there are protections for government employees and private employees that protect them from discrimination based upon race in employment, so they can take advantage of those. But we need to get rid of people who are not working.
Right.
And I don't disagree with that.
Very quickly, some thoughts on the governor's race. You saw where, if strangely, this one GOP governor's candidate, Michael Williams, said he was told that he could get out of the race, he should stay out of the race, but he'd be given an appropriations committee chairmanship.
My goodness.
My goodness is right. And of course, the Casey Cagle people pushed back on that strongly, saying nothing occurred. So I think it's going to heat up. I know we'll be talking about this more, but I just saw that one. I didn't know if anybody had a comment on it.
Well, Mr. Williams has Dog the bounty hunter on his side, and while that may be a real plum for him, I'm going to wait to see who rolls out the first endorsement from a professional wrestler before I make my decision.
Well, thank you for that. Well, time is flying here. When we come back, we're going to be doing winners and losers. Stay with us.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams. We're going to turn to Alexa Scott.
To start with winners and losers.
Yes.
Okay, my loser is going to be Jeff Mann, sort of, because he was removed, but my winner is going to be Captain Ruth Stringer, who is the interim sheriff in DeKalb County. She's a longtime veteran of the department, and kudos to her to get that position, and I hope she does well and things go well for her in that position. Also, Jane Smith, who's vice president at Spelman College, is the new chair of the Historic Southview Preservation Foundation. Had its annual meeting this past week, and I was able to pass the gavel on to her. Lucky me, I'm a winner too. Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey.
Well, I would say the fathers are winners, but that would be a little self-serving. It's like wishing yourself a happy birthday.
That's right. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers
that's
here.
right.
Sorry.
President Trump has got to be my winner this week because he pointed out, rightfully so, that the House repeal of the Affordable Care Act was mean. And Congress to do a
something
better
about
job and to be a little bit more compassionate, Carrie.
I think we can all be in favor of Congress doing a better job. Two giants in the Georgia legal community passed away this week. District Court Judge Marvin Shube and Circuit Court Judge Phyllis Kravich. He was 92, she was 96, and they were both towering figures in the Georgia legal community.
Right.
Evander Holyfield is a winner. The Real Deal was inducted last Saturday into the Boxing Hall of Fame, and that is an honor that he richly deserved. And then Dennis Rodman, the one-man freak show, is in North Korea again, and we will all be winners if he stays there. So that may very well be our secret weapon against the North Koreans.
I'm glad you made Evander a winner. You know, he moved to Atlanta when he was 5 years old and started boxing at 7. And I think we need to have a statue of him. Yeah,
we should.
Well, I've got a winner, and that is the Cyber Training Center over in Augusta. They're breaking ground tomorrow, Monday. Governor Deal will be there, and I think we all agree that we need to step it up in this country with regard to national security and cyber security. So that is a great development. And Jeff, I did this particularly for you and, of course, Alexis.
Of course.
It's Newt Gingrich's new book, and it's Understanding Trump. Now, I thought it would come in 18 volumes, but this is the short version, and it's very interesting. Whatever your political stripe, I think it's a great read by Newt Gingrich, so I would
You'd think it'd be 2
recommend
pages
it.
long. What are the other pages for?
That'll be 149.
I want you to go get it. Join us again next week on The Georgia Gang.
That was good.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.